Hello, my name is Sandy Fifecode, and I will be your host. In this video, we'll be discussing how to interpret and also how to implement the Common Core, leading a discussion on successful and innovative 21st century classrooms. Now, joining me in this discussion, we have Pam Allyn, and many of you may know who she is. She is the executive director and founder of Lit World, and she's the author of a series called Core Ready. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pam.
Oh, I'm happy to be with you.
Great. I want to start by sort of defining literacy in the context of the Common Core standards. Can you explain how literacy really is defined and the especially in the context of college and career readiness?
Sure. Yeah. One thing I find really exciting about the Common Core era, so to speak, is the way literacy is defined by the Common Core and the way things are organized in it to help us as teachers and administrators to really move our kids forward. And that is the Common Core identifies reading, writing, speaking, listening, and also language use. But the major areas of inquiry for the Common Core are reading, writing, speaking, and listening overall. And just the amazing thing about that is that it's just a true honoring, I think, of what literacy means at the deepest possible level, which is that we're constantly innovating new tools for how we share stories and how we share ideas. And some of those tools, seem really almost unbelievable to us because they're being invented every day. And others are classic, classic text, classic arts of storytelling and all of that. But what the Common Core does, it really organizes our goals and outcomes around this idea of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And in fact, in my book, Be Core Ready, I even add one more interesting dimension to that idea of literacy, and that is viewing, in the sense that we're looking at images, whether we're looking at art or we're looking at a YouTube video, even the viewing of that is a form of literacy. And the Common Core does also highlight those opportunities for media literacy and media enhancement in terms of our students' understanding of big ideas and knowledge. So really it's the exciting time is now because of these areas, especially speaking and listening, just have never gotten the credit they are due as literacies our students need to be college and career ready.
Terrific. Great definition. Thanks. Now, let's talk a little about new media. How do teachers really embrace new media in their classrooms to meet these new standards?
Well, I have actually, I'm a real proponent of the new media and also just really a blending of the way we've sort of used our tools all up until this point, whether it's carrying a book in the hand or a pen in our pocketbook, to what we have now, which is an extraordinary array of possibility around the tools, whether it's a tablet or a cell phone or your laptop. We have an amazing opportunity now to give all of our students the chance to really exceed and excel because the tools are so much more versatile. That being said, we can use tools in a way that isn't very innovative or inspired. And as everyone already knows, a smart board can serve very much like a chalkboard if we're not careful to really push ourselves to think how we can use the new media. So one of the things I've created is a little bit of a kind of a guidepost for teachers, and that is to say, are we using the new media in these three ways? One, in terms of process, and I'll explain this in a minute. Two is product. And three is presentation, what I call the 3 Ps. So when I think about process in the new media, I think about how I use, or any of my students or my colleagues use new media, whether it is, anything from a GChat to a Google Doc to an iPad to whatever that technology is that we're using to create ideas. So I'm creating ideas. That's my process. I'm using Evernote to record my ideas. I'm using YouTube to actually share my ideas. And so under process, it's about creating ideas and also about collaborating around ideas. And so that's number one. What I want my students to see is how, in terms of literacy, I can help them to really go deeper in terms of what they're thinking about, what kinds of arguments they're creating for new ideas they have in the world, and also how they collaborate with others. So that's process. In terms of product, I think about what we're creating and what we're making and also what we're receiving. So what I'm most interested in terms of product is I'm interested to know how my students are using the new media to actually really put their ideas forward, and to present, to actually create something that really is going to matter, whether it matters to me because I'm keeping an online journal, or it matters to my community because I'm writing a blog post that really influences someone, or because I'm creating a product that's a research paper that my teacher will read and also become inspired by. In terms of presentation, obviously products and presentation can overlap, but what I mean by presentation is really authentic audience, and that is that the product is fine and can get a grade, yes, and that's sort of how our students have always thought about product. But what I want to take it one step further is to say, who is my audience, so that my students can use the new media to actually say, I could tell a story about my life, or I could write a piece about Abraham Lincoln, and those pieces can actually be shared with my friends in a rural village in Kenya, for that matter. And it's very possible for us now to envision this because it really is happening. My students are connecting with each other all around the world. And so that presentation actually about recycling, a project my students did in Kibera, Kenya, on recycling, where they built a bench out of all the bottles that they found in the trash in their community, that picture has been circulated thousands of times among other lit clubs that we have all around the world, including right here in New York, so that my students can say, I didn't only just influence my community, but my presentation has really influenced the world. And I think that's the role of new media: process, product, presentation.
Terrific. Very, very good point. Now, if we think about students and technology, can you give us a few ways that students might think about enhancing their learning in this Common Core area?
In terms of technology?
Yes.
Well, I think what I'm noticing is two things. One is that I do think that it makes a personalized learning more impactful to know that I can confer with my students one-to-one, or they can confer with each other one-to-one. So one is I actually see improvement in writing skills thanks to technology. Something as simple as an example of I'll ask students to post their draft on a Google Doc, for example, and then I can go on there and comment on it, and so can their writing partner. And so that becomes a much more personalized way of improving writing skills. Everyone is there on the document. It's a much more fluid way to revise rather than I'm sitting there with pieces of paper trying to cut things up, and and it's complicated to do all that. But the Google Doc, as one example, is a very simple, free example of how the technology is actually improving my students' skills. Another example would be that, for example, if my students are using a site like VoiceThread, where they're posting finished products, they're maybe, let's say they read a nonfiction piece about, let's see, something like obesity, and the issue lately in the country. There's been a lot of discussion around this and what the confluence with obesity is with poverty and access to really healthy food in poor communities. That seems like a complicated issue. But if you use a website like VoiceThread, which is password protected, students can get on there and actually post an image, a poster, a quote, a photograph, a statistic. It doesn't have to be 5 pages what they're posting, but they're really influencing each other. They're saying, hey, I have an idea. What do you think about this? And they're building off of each other's ideas. And I just think one is the conferring. We can improve our students' writing skills, and two is they can collaborate more effectively and really learn from each other, as opposed to I wrote a 5-page paper, you wrote a 5-page paper, he wrote a 5-page paper, and none of us are ever even going to read each other's papers, or else we are going to sit and listen, and it's just going to take forever and be very boring. So the collaboration potential online and on the media, on the technology is so fantastic. And then maybe I'll just say one more thing, and that is, this is the very simplest thing. This isn't about a child's own creation, but this is really about e-readers, and that is, there are some amazing apps out there now that are really promoting the e-readership for our youngest children. So, from K through 5, there's been a gap. Our publishers have taken, a while to get up to speed on turning books over to the digital universe, but now that's happening. And so we have amazing opportunities like the We Give Books site, where kids can go there and read online. We have the Storia app, where you can download thousands of books. We have all kinds of apps that allow our kids to get access to books. As long as they have a tablet or a laptop, they will get access to thousands of books that otherwise they would never have access to before. And to me, that's just unbelievably fantastic.
Very good. Very good suggestions. And I would encourage our listeners to look at the video and also the blog associated with this podcast, because we'll give you links to the sites that Pam has mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about your Core Ready series. I know that it's a new series that you've just written to help teachers implement the Common Core. And in there you talk about the 4 doors to the core. Can you explain what that means and what it has to do with 21st century teaching and learning?
Yes. So one of the things just in my work, visiting classrooms and coaching teachers and listening to teachers when I'm speaking as well, is that teachers are, we're all, the Common Core Standards is a long document. It spans obviously many grade levels. It's complicated, and I was really striving for a way to simplify for teachers what the Common Core can look like, because state by state, administrators are saying, we're not mandating the type of curriculum you're using. We're just saying you have to get to these standards. And while that may seem open and friendly, it's actually very intimidating, because there's a document you're supposed to get to. You're supposed to achieve those goals. Now the question is how to do it. So I spent a long time really, really investigating this Common Core sort of themes and language, and crystallized curriculum development around 4 major areas that the Common Core offers. And that's what I call the 4 doors. In other words, I saw recurring themes across every single grade level, and I said, if we're going to build a curriculum, which I did, the curriculum in my books that followed called the Core Ready series that are coming out now in a rolling fashion, those books really came out of my desire to organize the Common Core. And I think these 4 doors can be used, whether or not you use all the books in the series, you can use them to take a look at and even do an audit on an existing curriculum to say, are these 4 doors in place? So number 1 is the journey to meaning. What I see in the Common Core is that the Common Core is asking our students to comprehend, critique, and compose literary texts. So students have to be able to think deeply about the meaning of what they read, carefully selecting skills and strategies for doing so with purpose. They also have to be able to search for key ideas and details, ask and answer questions, draw inferences, all of this under the umbrella of what I call the journey to meaning, and that's happening at each grade level. They get higher and higher levels as they go up that staircase. So number 1 is this idea of meaning making. On the writing side, too, that students are given opportunities throughout every grade level to experiment with writing strategies, including character development and opportunities to share their writing in a way that helps them bring deeper meaning to the experience they're writing about or the argument that they're trying to present. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the door I call the shape of story, and that is to say that story is very illuminated in the Common Core. I think there's been a little bit of confusion because people have said, okay, personal narrative is out, no more personal narrative in the Common Core, but actually what the Common Core is really saying is that personal narrative just for the sake of telling a story like I got up, I went to school, I came home, or a small moment that's like I'm going to talk about my grandmother's hand for 20 minutes, that's not so revered in the Common Core. But what is revered is the power of story, is metaphor, is using the story of my grandmother's hand to tell a bigger story, that quality literature is really key in the Common Core, classic text, contemporary text, using that text as models for our students' own writing, that students are creating literary responses to the literature that they're reading so they recognize, understand, and appreciate the power of story, from myths to folk tales to narrative. So this idea of story as being central to the Common Core is really true, and it's really sort of staircasing up over time. Third door is the road to knowledge. And this, again, there's a little bit of a misconception about the Common Core that this is the only door, and that is completely not true. There's as much emphasis on story as there is on knowledge, but I think people are anxious about knowledge. What is the knowledge we're supposed to be providing? The road to knowledge, as I call it, is the third door, and that is that we're encompassing research, information, and art and text to be able to cite evidence, to be able to go back to a text to say, hey, look, I learned this is what I found out, these are my trusted sources, to glean key ideas and details, noticing patterns of concepts and events. And all of this is happening through this door, the road to knowledge. So in other words, that's why we should be really promoting the Common Core reading, writing, speaking, listening skills in the content areas too, and not just in the ELA classroom. But the road to knowledge is, what I've done is created a series of lessons around helping students arrange ideas and research in well-organized, informative, and explanatory ways. And then finally, last but not least, the fourth core-ready core door, and that is the power to persuade. And that is the fact that the Common Core at every single grade level really emphasizes this idea of students developing an awareness of purpose and point of view as they explore text, and really understanding that their own reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills help them learn how to persuade, to argue, and to present opinions that belong to them but also are really evidence-based. So these are the four doors: the journey to meaning, the shape of story, the road to knowledge, and the power to persuade. And I feel, these four doors, I have created curriculum around each of these four doors that teachers can use. But also, if you have a curriculum that you're using, to say, are all these four doors represented? Because they're just a good guidepost for what I see as being major patterns that occur at every grade level.
Terrific. Well, I know that today I've gained a deeper knowledge and understanding of the core curriculum and its relationship to literacy, because you've done such a great job of persuading me. So thank you so much, as always, Pam, for your expertise and your time. I think this is going to be a really valuable set of information for teachers to have a deeper understanding of the core curriculum. So thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, and best of luck to everyone listening.
Great. That's all the time we have today, but we want to hear from our audience. So please email us at whatcast@weareteachers.com. Provide us any thoughts or feedback, and let us know if there are special topics you'd like for us to cover in the future. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.